Hello and welcome to today's live session on Storytel. Today's guest is a very special person, of course, my most favorite author that I've got the privilege to work with. She's a best selling author of a country and a critically acclaimed one at that, too. She has penned novels like The Better Man, Mistress, Letters on Forgetting, Ladies Coupe, and there are many more. On Storytel, she has penned several audiobooks, which has been read by actors like Konkona Sen Sharma, Satyajit Mishra, and the veteran actor Prakash Raj. But a very special mention to one of them, which is Why I Killed My Husband, which was written and read by Anita Nair herself. Today's story is actually a story which is really, really very powerful and as well as heart wrenching. A Field of Flower, written by her and narrated by Prakash Raj sir. Without wasting much time, let me invite Anita Nair, our guest for today's evening. Hello, Anita.
Hi, Shramita.
How are you today, and how have been the days like in Bangalore, given this lockdown situation right now?
Yeah, it's been everything was locked up for a long time, and now things have started opening up. And the partial lockdown also is going to be lifted from this weekend, I hear.
Hmm.
But as far as I'm concerned, it really doesn't make any difference to me, one way or the other. I'm not a person who steps out too much. Very, very content to stay within my little world and and just be there.
Lovely, lovely to hear that. So let's talk about A Field of Flowers. And it's a very, very powerful story. I mean, when I read it for the first time, I think every time I read it, I cry. There's something that hits your heart so well, and it just kind of stays with you. So tell us a little bit about the story to the people that who don't know yet about it.
Yeah, so with one of the things that I have been actually trying to do with the stories that I write, Storytel specifically, is to write about things that are happening in contemporary India and things that are happening so often that we, don't even register it too much anymore. We open the newspaper or whatever web magazine that we're reading, and you open it and then you read about a rape here, a rape there, and you just it just becomes a statistic in your head and nothing else. So around I mean last year September 14th or 15th, I can't get it, don't remember the date exactly, is when the Hathras rape happened. And I think in many ways there were like so many of these incidents that had been happening. Those two girls who were, killed and strung up in again, I think in UP and so on. And I kept thinking that, what is it about this particular incident that kind of hit me so hard? And I remember that I was watching some television news, and there was this particular politician talking about this particular tragedy, the Hathras rape. And he said that, that they shouldn't be doing this and they shouldn't be doing that. And basically, he said that, if the girl was found, rapes happen in places where there are fields. It seemed like a most banal statement to make, and also and one of the most thoughtless statements anybody could make. It was like basically saying that, oh yes, because there are fields, there is cover, and these kind of things will happen, and just go on with your life, kind of thing. And I think that hit me so much, and and it just stayed there. And the I think one of the I don't know if it is a joy or if it's an energy that comes from wherever, but there are many things before a story is formed. There are many things that happen within the state, within the mind, and it's a lot like different thoughts, all of them coming from different directions, and then suddenly all of it fits into place exactly like as if I had planned to write it. It wasn't as if I planned to write any of what I wrote, but it just so happened and everything fell into place. So with Field of Flowers, I knew suddenly that I wanted to use mythology, but I was going to do a contemporary retelling of it. And one of the most shameful episodes in mythology, Indian mythology, is, I mean, there are several, but one of the most shameful ones is where Draupadi is disrobed in front of the whole court, and nobody says anything, and nobody does anything about it. And Draupadi finally has to beseech to Krishna, and Krishna finally arrives just when she's going to be stripped naked. He's there, and the sari becomes like endless. So she's never stripped. Now, one of the questions that has also bothered me all through my life is, ever since I heard the story, is that why is it that Krishna had to wait until the last minute to rescue her? Why
Mm.
couldn't he have given her her dignity right in the beginning? And there is this, I think I remember watching it in some Tamil film a long time ago, where this question is asked by a man to Krishna, I think, or something like that. I remember watching this film when I was about 10 or 11, so it's a long time ago. And this man says that, I think Krishna says that, Draupadi just stood with her hands like this, covering her bosom. And the moment she took her hands off and it became an act of abject surrender, then God appears. And I was like, I mean, that is the explanation in the film. But in a strange way, it made sense to me. And it only made me angrier. Every time I thought about it, it made me angry. So is it this whole thing of that divinity requires abject surrender, divinity requires you to have total faith, all that is fine. But
Mm.
divinity can't be really sitting up wherever divinity sits and watching this tamasha going on in the world. So all of that is making me angry, makes me angry. And then for me, when I'm really um angry. I mean, and it's like a cold rage, it's a very cold rage. I think it finds expression in words. And so all of this fell into place together. Suddenly the story of Balarama, and the only person who was very upset at this whole episode that happened with Draupadi. All the others were ashamed, embarrassed, everything, but someone who wanted to, like, yes, Bhima stood up in the audience, but he was asked to come down and sit down by his brother. When Balarama hears about it later, he gets very, very angry, but then Krishna dissuades him from not, you know, uh, taking on the Kauravas.
Mm.
And so, like I said, again, there's all of this, and I thought the only man who had some dignity in this whole, not even Krishna, the only person who showed any dignity and true empathy and was really angry was Balrama. So suddenly it came to me that Balarama has to be the narrator of the story. And then in one of those glorious coincidences, I discovered that Vrindavan is not too far from, or Vrindavan as it's called now, is not too far from Hathras, etc. So all of it strangely fell into place. It felt like I was ordained to write the story,
Mm.
that somebody had to write about these things. Somebody had to, speak up about it. And yes, there's a lot of it being written in, I think, in Indian writing, in our various languages, but not enough, I think, in English, where these questions are popped up, instead of which most of the time our fiction and our literature dwells in the world of, the inner mindscape, and which
Mm.
is wonderful. Here as well, there is a lot of, you know, delving into the mindscape, but it's also about the externals.
Mm. Mm. So it's only like it's a retelling of you know, even from the past with a very contemporary these characters were very contemporary. For the listeners, I would like to say the way it's been written are, I mean, one would just imagine that this is happening right now, but the characters are Balarama and Krishna, and if one can follow those characters from Mahabharata.
So, which
Uh,
is why even in this story, I had you have Arjun, you have Bhim, you have Duri, who is Duryodhana,
yeah.
and there is, of course, the main protagonist, I would think, who is Shama. And
Mm,
One of the other names of Draupadi is Shama.
mm,
So it was just a contemporary retelling of that episode.
wonderful. Well, Anita, what really kind of brings me to this question was I wanted to ask you while I was reading it also that there are very heart wrenching moments in the story. I mean, at part there are something that you've written which is off the actual incident. So I would like to know from you how was your experience of writing it? What were you feeling when you were writing it?
So I tend to internalize a lot, when I'm writing whatever I'm writing. So in pretty much everything that is happening to me. So I'm what is probably happening to Balarama, what is happening to Bhim, what is happening to Shyama. All of it is something that I go through the whole experience to in my mind. And while it's very, I think probably easy to dismiss it as saying it's all in the head. It's not really because it manifests itself in the way you look at life for a few days and the
Mm,
way how it affects you health wise and everything. So this was one story that I think shattered me writing it. It just crippled my soul more than anything else because it's also about having to there are those statements that are made which Balarama makes about when he tells her that you shouldn't you shouldn't go into that hostel, the Dalit hostel. Have you seen what it looks like? And basically what he wants is he doesn't want her to study too much,
mm,
just wants to keep her where she is. And all of that, when I'm writing that, it would, on the one hand, I have to make it credible, to make it seem like it's as authentic as it is. I have to believe in it at that point when I'm
mm,
when I'm being writing from that character's point of view.
mm,
So a lot of it is against everything that I believe in.
mm,
So having to slip into the skin of a character who is not the kind of person that I am, whether it
mm,
is Duri or whether it's Shama or whether it's uh, Balarama or Krishna, the kind of excuses they make for their own behavior, all of that, all of that, I internalize it. I have to go through it in my head before I'm actually able to write it. And so I think that every story I write, especially since I write mostly literary fiction, it just, I think, devastates me. And then I have to recover and come back to who I was before I wrote the story.
it's quite a journey, I guess, because
Yeah, it
the
is.
really, really intense story. I mean, A Field of Flower, I think even Prakash ji, I remember the first time he called me when he read he had tears in his eyes, he said, when he was reading it. So these are,
Yeah.
and then we wonder that what you must have gone through when you have written it. So tell me, Anita, that brings me to this question. Why are we not learning from this society? Are we really not kind of evolving as a society? What is your, I mean, the caste conflicts, the rapes, the hatred. Why are we not learning, do you think? What is it?
So I think, there are many factors at play here. One, of course, is that the sense of entitlement that Indian men are born with, and they're raised to believe so that they are entitled to doing whatever that they're entitled to. And the sense of entitlement goes up when you're of a higher caste. And finally, I think the sense of entitlement hits its zenith if you're rich, upper caste, Hindu living and male living in India, where you think that many of these privileges are what you are entitled to. many things. But unfortunately, what happens is that they despite being educated, even if there are even with education, that there doesn't seem to be too much of difference in how marginalized communities, including women, because I'd like to put them in that classification as well, are
Mm.
seen and treated. And I think the other thing that comes into play here is that the the degree of corruption in our system,
Yeah.
that makes that a person who comes from a privileged background or has a sense of privilege um, believe that he can work the system to his benefit.
Yeah.
That he can get away with it,
Mm.
and it's probably because our judicial system takes forever to convict such cases. Yes, every time that there's a hue and cry, then there is a case that's fast tracked, and you hear about it. But even then, how many people get justice for what happens to them, especially women?
Yeah.
Whether in terms of rape or homicide or whatever. A lot of it goes, or if you're a Dalit, or if you're, unless of course it's a media sensational case, then
Yeah.
probably something happens. But otherwise, mostly it's all kind of it just becomes another file on a table or
Mm.
a folder in a computer. That's about it. And
Yeah,
I
I
think,
think.
there's I mean, this is a question that keeps coming up. What can you do to make this better?
Mm.
I mean, we need to be able to change people, change men in the way they look at women. I think it's not just when I say look, it's not just the male gaze I'm talking of. I'm talking about, I mean, not just the figurative male gaze. I'm talking also about the literal male gaze. Where you see the woman as an equal, not as someone who's a piece of property to be plundered or to be owned or to be discarded.
Mm.
That where there is, I think there is probably in the current India that we live in, especially, I think there's probably more respect given to a cow than to a woman or anybody from a marginalized community.
But I also feel sex as a concept is so much a taboo in our country. We are made to feel that, oh my God, like, you should not use that word. It's such a harsh thing. But at the same
Mhm.
time, everyone has it in their subconscious. It's working. That from educated to uneducated, the porn sites, or the way people use those sites is increasing with time. But how the society is made to look like that. Oh my God, it's such a taboo. Don't even talk about it. I think this is a very repulsive mentality that kind of is growing within each and every one here, and that's why
No,
I
it's
think.
also this whole thing that what happens. I think is that there's so much repression. There's always this taboo between men and women spending time together, and every time the obvious conclusion, even in this time and age, and I'm not talking about the big cities, but I'm talking about small towns and villages and all that stuff, is where if a man and woman are seen talking together, then they have something going on. There's
Yes.
always this element of suspicion to their behavior and what they're up to, and and so on. And so that happens on the one hand. At the same time, uh, men are also obviously men. There's so much of repression that is going on, and there's so much of porn available now that so many. I'm not saying that porn sites make men rapists. That's nonsense. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that repression is what causes the rape, and
Exactly.
repression, it finally becomes like something that it turns them into beasts. The bestiality part of them emerges rather
Mm.
than the human part of them, and it just becomes like an animal going for the kill and nothing else beyond that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is something that I think something that is really get very kind of affected with. I mean, whenever I hear anything that's going on,
Mm,
and I think it is each and every one of us who needs to be responsible about it.
mm,
This outlook, there is no others doing it. It's within each and every one of us. I guess that, of course,
mm,
that's the message that you have given us through the
mm.
story. But there is no other way, I guess, apart from being that responsible, right?
So I think that we need to talk about it more and more and more because it's not talking about, let's say, we talk especially in fiction, in Indian fiction, in English. We talk about a lot of abuse. We talk about, there are many things that are talked about,
Mm,
but um, for whatever reason, most of the times, I'm not talking about translations. Most of the time, the lives that we're writing about or reading about are urban lives, where
yeah.
the challenges are very different from,
Mm,
say, suburban or small town or villages,
yeah.
and and for whatever reason, I've been somebody who's been who really can't write an urban novel because I find that too much of navel gazing for me. So I would rather, write about the small towns and villages, and I've always tried to write about that. Even when I'm writing a Bangalore novel, I've chosen to write about the outskirts of Bangalore
Mm,
because I think that is the area that needs to be talked about, the area that we need to be able to include in this dialogue that's going on about how can we be better people in a society.
mm, right. Yes, all your stories always brings up these pertinent questions which we as a society should be asking, and that was where my next question was coming from. I mean, are these something that are these the questions that you yourself have? That you express. Our stories your ways to express your inner questions or the conflicts that you see around you. How do you?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there are different ways different people react, to different things. I know my limitations, and I know that what I can do and what I can't do, and I know that one thing that I can do is sensitize people to the issues around us, and that somebody needs to talk about it, because all the time, it's we most of us, the urban middle class, we tend to kind of gloss over it. We it's not our lives, it doesn't affect us personally. Some girl got raped in Hathras, some other girl got, a man got killed in Meerut, because whatever, that the stories are like always that, and it always seems so distant from our very snug little lives. And increasingly what is going to happen is there's going to be two parallel Indias happening. There's going to be one India which doesn't believe that any of these things, or doesn't really acknowledge any of these things are happening, and there's going to be another India where these things are actually happening.
Mm,
And what I'm trying to do is, because I write in English, I'm trying to sensitize people like you and me to what is actually happening around us. I mean, we can't all just be Twitter warriors.
yeah.
We need to. Twitter is just a fraction of the world that we inhabit. And yes, I see so much ire and anger and everything happening on Twitter. But what does it? What does it do? Or social media, on social media. So I thought what I would do is use the medium of audio to speak to the world, to the world as in our world, about what are those issues that we as a society have to deal with today. What are we doing about it? Are we just going to, like, feel sorry about it and then turn our heads and walk away? So it could be something as basic as how you bring up a boy.
Mm,
How do you sensitize him to understanding women better or treating a woman with respect? All of that. So
mm,
with audio, what happens is that I think it reaches the reach is much vaster than probably when a book is written. So that in that sense, this has become really like my political tool more than anything else, to be able to talk, with stories, through stories.
And thank God for that. And thank you for that, Anita. I think we have got one of the best stories from you on Storytel. Now, coming to talk about the voice of your story, of course, Mr. Prakash Raj, he had read A Little Dark Girl, which also had a very, very strong message, and now this one, A Field of Flowers. And I think he just kind of gets the words. I mean, he just get it right. The words that you are writing and you're wanting to communicate. What is this like? What do you think that really works between this writer and a narrator who's translating or transforming the story in his own way? But
So I think that with Prakash, one of the things is that I have huge respect for his work. So I know how I can see what he does with every single character that he has portrayed on screen, and in my own way, I understand it as that he internalizes it as
mm,
much as I do when I'm writing a character. So I need that, for me, it's very important that the voice who is taking this work, the story out to the world, is able to become the character. And
mm,
in both cases, when in The Little Dark Girl and A Field of Flowers, I don't think anybody else could have done it as well as Prakash did, because his investment into the character is supreme. It is 100%, and it is like I know, like what I went through writing the story is exactly what he went through when he was reading it,
yeah,
and that allows for this, I think, this indescribable or magic that happens. There's no way you can quantify it, or no way you can put a process and technique, methodology to it, or anything. There's absolutely, it's just that something that is moved. When I write it, I'm moved, and the power of those words, when he reads them out, they are even more magnified, because he
absolutely.
brings into it a wealth of his own experience, his political beliefs, all of that. So it's kind of an, I think it's what I mean, two of these stories that I did for Storytel, I think, are pieces of work that I am very, very, very proud of as its creator. Where every time I listen to it, I feel this frisson of excitement, saying that, oh my God, look at what this man did with the story.
Absolutely, absolutely. He is fantastic. Now, coming to talk about your own narration. Of course, what's coming up on Storytel, I would like to talk about a little bit. But let's hear it from you. That what you've just completed recording and what's coming up on Storytel.
Yeah, so I, Satyr of the Subway and 11 other stories, or 12 other stories. We have one more in this one. So I was like, the original was Satyr of the Subway and 11 other stories. Now it is one more, so which is why I said that. This is a reissued edition that I read out from, where it's included a couple of other stories as well. So this was my first book, and again, it was a book that I put a lot of. I mean, every book I do put my heart and soul into it, but this was my book that um, created, I think, in a way, a niche for who I am as a writer today. And since they are short stories, and I so much enjoyed narrating why I killed my husband, that I thought I would like to read the stories myself. Because the thing is, as an author, one of the things that worries me is when narrators read, and if they are not invested in the story, it's very obvious, and so for me, if it isn't Prakash or somebody of his caliber reading it, then I would rather read it on my own, because I know that I have a decent speaking voice, and I know the nuances.
And you are also a musician, so that also I'm sure adds up to it. I mean, your way of understanding music, I think that's also another thing that really adds to it, because at the end of the day, it's all about sound. But I
Hmm.
also think Konkona and Satyadev did a fabulous job of twin
Oh
beds.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. They did a fantastic job as well of Konkana. I mean, Konkana and Satyajit, they did an amazing job. I mean, they just kind of transport you into that little beautiful hotel, and you're just there, and you're thinking like, and so that's what I mean, that different voices have a
Mm,
certain ability to take you to different places,
yes,
and the more intense ones are, I think, probably best narrated by the author, if the author can do it, or
yes,
because there are cases where authors can't read, and you can't fault them for it because that's not what they're meant to be doing. But there are actors who bring their, I think, their screen, I mean, understanding of portraying characters on the screen, and so they know how to use their voice
mm.
to that effect. So yeah.
Yeah, and of course, globally, it's also been quite a ritual for the author to narrate their own book, and
Mhm.
also those are the books that kind of gets very popular because author actually does the best job of reading the book because they are the one who's written it. So
Yeah, the nuances, that's
yeah,
the whole thing. It's also that what happens is that, um, for instance, in a short story collection like The Satyr of the Subway, the stories are all from different perspectives.
mm,
They are, on the one hand, you have a very a story about an elderly woman stuck in an old age home. On the other hand, you have the story of a young couple going to visit a family. So it's all different perspectives. And sometimes what can happen is that, if the narrator is not cued in completely into the different characters or emerging in each story, it can sound repetitive. It can also sound like a bit of a drone after a while. So, which is why, even while, for instance, while I was recording Satyr, I try to do it in about 3 or 4 sittings so that the voice is different with every sitting.
yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Um, so I would again, I mean, of course, you've been one of the very first authors that we started to work, with you or writing audiobooks. So how do you feel, Anita? It's been almost 2 to 3 years, I guess. So do you think the country is more prepared and they're more open to listening to audiobooks or sort of books which are of long lengths? What do you think?
I just hope. See, for instance, I grew up listening to radio. To this day, I'm somebody who likes to listen to podcasts before I go to sleep and stuff like that. I like that talk in the background there as I'm kind of drifting off to sleep. And I think what happens is that I also register a lot at that point. Stories stay in my head because my mind is beginning to relax at that point and so on. So I just wish that people would do that and listen to audio stories if and rather than checking on their social media handles before going to sleep. Nothing's really going to change between the last 1 hour. So, but here's something, because I know a lot of people who also tell me that the reading a book is daunting for them, probably because they are afraid that they may not know the meaning of certain words, or just the idea of having a book in your hands and having to plod through it and so on, right? So for
Mm,
people like that who don't really have a reading habit, audio, I think, works wonderfully in the sense that they can listen to good literature from around the world, and they can now choose the language they want to listen in. And they can, actually increase their own understanding um, of what is good literature.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
So I'm
we all.
hoping that there'll be more listeners over the next few years than we had now.
Yeah, we do hope so, and we also seeing a lot more people being interested in listening to audiobooks. That's a good thing for us. So yes, Anita. So I mean, I think a field of flowers, then satire of subway, and then there are many more coming up on Storytel from you. What would be your message to your audience, your readers, and your listeners on
Listeners, yeah.
Storytel?
So my one message is that, please don't take anything for granted, and look at the world around you. You cannot live in this little bubble where you think, that your life is fine and that's all matters. It can't be that, as I'm somebody who's always stood up for the individual rather than the society, but the individual has a responsibility to the society you're part of, and especially if the society is falling apart, like it is in India at this point. The degree of hatred that we have around us um, worries me more than anything else. And I keep thinking, what is this world and what is this? I mean, on the one hand, there's so much of ecological disasters happening, but also what is the society or norms of the society we are leaving behind for the generations to
Mm.
come? What are they going to think? This whole perception of what is right and wrong is also completely askew now. That it's very scary. And I keep thinking that, well, who are we regressing into? We are not developing; we are regressing actually.
Mm.
And so the only way we can put a halt to it, or at least steer it in a different direction, is by acknowledging what is happening around us and protesting about it. So as a writer, what I think I do is I try and raise these uncomfortable questions that people want to kind of shove under the carpet, but I'd like to pull it out and make readers and listeners aware of what is happening around us and why we cannot you know just be bystanders.
Yeah.
In fact, Field of Flowers is basically that. It's about, you watching this crime happen and you're just a bystander. You're allowing it to happen by not stopping it. You're allowing it to happen, and then you're as much guilty of a crime as the person who actually perpetuated it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's the message, and that's a very, very important message that goes out from you through the story and from all of us, which is let's not be a bystander and kind of take the responsibility of voicing it out at every stage. Thank you so much, Anita. And as always, it was very, very nice talking to you. And I hope people listen to Field of Flowers, and it's just not an ordinary story. And I hope people starts thinking. I hope it helps them reflect a little bit on themselves, where they stand.
So thank you very much, Romita, and thank you very much for being the the publisher, editor, whatever designation that they have given you, uh, uh, for being the person who's allowed me to voice these stories. I'm constantly I there's this constant fear that is there some form of censorship that's going to happen, and until now, Storytel has been wonderful that way in making in enabling me to speak the stories that I want to.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And this is for the audience that we are soon going to come up with another release of Anita Nair. And I'm very much looking forward to it. And I think so is Anita. So let's see. And there are many more to come. So thank you, Anita. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Shiromita. Have a good evening.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Bye.